Hi, welcome to Accessibility on a Budget webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on Mid-America Arts Alliance's website. Our website is www.maa.org. My name is Angie Sievert, and I'm the Operations Manager and Accessibility Coordinator with Mid-America Arts Alliance. Mid-America is one of the 6 national regional arts organizations. We partner with the National Endowment for the Arts, our 6 state arts agencies, which includes the states of Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Texas, and other funders to strengthen and support artists, cultural organizations, and communities throughout the region and beyond. It is support from the NEA and our 6 state arts agencies that we are able to bring this webinar to you today. Before we proceed to the topic, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. Closed caption is available during this webinar. You can get closed captioning by clicking on the button at the bottom of your screen to turn it on. You can adjust the size of the text by clicking the arrow next to the start or the stop video and selecting the video settings. Click on accessibility and move the slider to adjust the size of the text. You can also view Spanish closed captioning by clicking on a link that will be added into the chat box. You can adjust the size, color, and font of the text in that window and also choose to see English closed captioning too. You can also ask a question during the webinar by clicking on the Q&A box or by also posting a question into the chat box. We will be monitoring these questions during the webinar, and we should have time for questions at the end today. Now to introduce our panelists for today's webinar. Joining us today are Christina Shutt. She is the Executive Director at the Mosaic Templars Cultural Center in Little Rock, Arkansas. And also joining us is Fran Sillau. He's Accessibility Coordinator, Director, Teaching Artist at the Rose Theater in Omaha, Nebraska. And now I'll turn this over to Christina.
Well, hello, everyone, and greetings from Arkansas. We're going to get started. I'm going to share my screen here. Get started with our presentation. All right, so again, my name is Christina Shutt, and our institution is the Mosaic Templars Cultural Center. Our mission is to preserve, interpret, and celebrate African American history in Arkansas. This photo on the side is actually a picture of our building with our newest creation, banners that we had created by artist named Perian Hurd. He's a fantastic artist. He actually hand painted all of the images. So there are 8 of these banners surrounding the building. So this was our Black History Month image for this year. I want to begin just by showing you a brief video that we had done about 2 years ago, talking a little bit about accessibility and really our philosophy and thinking behind it. So this will play.
Here at the Mosaic Templars Cultural Center, it's important to us that we be a museum for all Arkansans. Inclusive Arkansas really is about making museums welcoming people. I think a lot of times people don't implement accessibility or think about accessibility because we don't think about it as being something we need. But what we found is that there are often a lot of low-cost things that you can do. And the biggest thing that we've discovered is that just listening to people and asking what do they need? How can we enhance their museum experience and truly make it the best one for them and their families?
It's very important because there are people with disabilities, especially visual impairments, who may think of museums as being boring places because they really can't see the things that are in the museums.
So some of the ways that we implement Inclusive Arkansas here at the museum, we have different touch tables that people can interact with that allow them to interact with content in a way where if they're not someone who reads English, they can interact through visual stimulation on our touch tables. We also have earmuffs for folks that might have sensitivity to echoing or sound issues, magnifying sheets, which have been really helpful for some of our elderly visitors who maybe have low sight or low vision.
We found that this was very interactive for our daughter. The fact that she was able to interact with the table, bringing up information on different historical figures, made it extremely easy for someone with her limitations to participate in.
I firmly believe in being able to touch as many things as possible. It's great when you're a young child and you can come to the museum and you can touch something, you can touch history, and you can feel history. So a lot of the inclusivity and accessibility features that we have added to the museum and that we'll continue to add to the museum are all about reinforcing that concept and that core principle that we truly are a museum for all of Arkansas.
All right. Oop, go down. There we go. So really, again, a lot of our thinking comes from a philosophy that we really do want to be a museum for everyone. And that is, I would say, one of our kind of core values when we think about accessibility is how do we make our space welcoming to people? How do we let them know that they are a part of the team, that they are part of the Mosaic family? And so I have this photo of a bus because I think oftentimes we forget the simpler things, right? About how do people get to the museum? How do they enter your institution? Do they drive to get to your institution? Do they take a bus? Do they take some other form of public transportation? Do they bicycle? What's the way in which they access your building and your space? How do they enter your space? So, you know, one of the things I often suggest for folks that, again, is it's basically a free thing that you can do, right? You can go outside and you can walk from your building, from the parking lot to your building, to your front door. How far is it to there? You know, we're hearing now, you know, we used to think of it, I should say, as it was just elderly people, right, that might need a bench or a seat. But now, of course, with, you know, potentially thousands and thousands of people having long-term respiratory disabilities and other things as a result of COVID-19, it's going to be more important than ever that people have those breaks and those spots, those benches where they can take a rest, right, before they continue on. And so just walking your building can be a great, again, free thing that you can do to think about your space. You know, do people know where your door is? Our building, the way it's situated, it can be kind of confusing of like where the entrance is. And so when we walked our building, we realized, oh, we need a sign out front that says, hey, enter here. This is where the door is to our building, because it can be confusing. You know, I think one of the best things that we can often do is if someone can walk into your building, get into your space without having to ask a question of somebody, right? That information is available on your website. It's maybe, if you don't have a website, maybe on a voice recorded message about how to access your building. If that information is easy for them to get to, it makes a huge difference. You know, we often think about ourselves and what we need, but oftentimes what we really need to be thinking about is asking those questions and saying, well, what does that person need? What would be helpful for them to be able to connect with us? And getting to the building is one of the biggest things. Also thinking about signage. And so not only the signs on your building, but the signs as people are getting into your building. So if there's ways that you can partner with your local city council or the chamber, you know, oftentimes there's different people that put signage up saying where your building is. That can be really helpful, again, in helping people navigate to those spaces. One of the things that we did, and that we have on our website, I've provided links in the notes section, which I think is being put up in the chat right now. But on our website, we have a social narrative. Social narratives are really photos with a story to outline expectations. They say, do this, don't do this. They can be helpful, of course, for young children, period, but they're really helpful for oftentimes for children on the spectrum, of knowing what to expect, of knowing what those kind of social norms are that maybe the rest of us, that many of us are kind of cued into, but they don't always cue into. And then remembering if you're putting together a social narrative, to use kind of that first then or if then language, right? So we're going to do this first, and then we're going to do this. Because again, allowing those steps in can be really helpful. Another thing related to that is sometimes outlining. I know a lot of people have been thinking about and putting in, directions. I know I've seen it like the grocery stores, right? Go up this aisle, then not this aisle, right? That's actually a really great sort of universal design thing that's useful for a lot of people. So saying, okay, you need to be directed to go this way in our institution, in our museum, because this is the flow of traffickers. This is the way that tells the story. So again, kind of subtle things that can be really helpful. Adding words like stop and go, because again, those are kind of universal signage that many, and particularly children, when you're trying to get children through your space, often understand. And I recommend, you're welcome to use our social narrative and copy it and use it for your own purposes. But I also recommend you can Google social narratives and look at other institutions. We weren't the first people to come up with social narratives. They've been around for a very long time. And so look at other folks, see what you like and what you don't like about theirs. But again, the key is to have a lot of photos in there and to use, you'll see in your corner arrows, right, that tell you where the volume controls are. Because again, the noise may be loud, right? And so we want you to know where you can control the volume. Another low cost and really kind of for us no cost thing to think about including is labeling. So I put a photo here of the difference between serif fonts and sans serif fonts. So, and of course, two examples. So a serif font, or Century Old Style, Times New Roman is a serif font. They have like the little hooks on there, right? And then the thick and thin strokes versus a sans serif font where it's more kind of plain and the strokes have even widths. So in a lot of our research that we found, we were kind of investigating how do we make our museum, again, more welcoming, we looked at those with dyslexia and what's the easiest way for them to read the text. And we found that actually dyslexic fonts could be hit or miss for folks. But if you used like an Arial size font, then that was something that most people could read and read pretty well. We also typically have a cream colored background, cream or kind of off-white color background that we use for any of our labels that we do for printing. And because we print all of our text labels for our exhibits in-house. And so we use a cream color paper for that. If we are getting a traveling exhibit, we will often ask them to send us a PDF of the label so that we can print it on our own colored paper. Because typically when we get traveling exhibits, they haven't necessarily thought of that. And so by asking them ahead of time and saying, hey, can we just print them ourselves? It's an easy way for us to, again, incorporate accessibility. But also think too, about translation services. So if you have a large Spanish speaking population in your community, offering translation services and not just like getting someone on your staff who kind of speaks Spanish, but actually hiring a translator. So that's one of those things where I would say that is it's worth the cost, right? It's worth the money. So, save your money on printing your own labels and then spend your resources on hiring a translation service or hiring someone to translate your labels if need be. Kind of related in the same vein of the labels, you can kind of see in the background, this is the Oakland Museum of California. And one of the things I love about them is that they actually print 3 languages because they have 3 different speaking communities a part of their sort of neighborhood. So they do English, Spanish, and Chinese to reflect the prominence of those languages on their main exhibit. And I think that's just such a great way to incorporate language. I love the design where they're in 3 different colors. It's a little bit hard to see in the presentation, but the languages are printed in 3 different colors. They're in 3 different areas. They're consistent throughout the exhibition. And so it makes it easy for people who, again, are engaging with that content. And then the other thing that we think about, both in labeling, but also when we're doing programming is, and again, particularly programming around families, is using family inclusive language. There are over, in fiscal year 2019, there were over 4,331 children in foster care in Arkansas. And of course, there are more than 400,000 children in the United States in foster care. And so we have taken a position that we don't assume that a child coming in with an adult is coming in with their parent, right? Or coming in even with their birth parent or their adopted parent. And so instead of using languages like parents or mom, dad, right, we use things like grown-up, adult, caregiver. We'll say, hey, your grown-up can help you with this. We use words like children because instead of using gendered language like son and daughter, because even where children identify of the gender that is also their sex, oftentimes they'll have haircuts or that may not be obvious, right? So again, using children is a really all-encompassing, gender inclusive kind of thing. Saying things like family. So we'll often do exhibits. We'll say, hey, we want you to bring your whole family out, right? And family can mean all sorts of things. And we're really broad when we say bring your family, right? It means bring anybody who is a part of your family. Anybody who you love and care about is welcome here. And so I put a link again for the Inclusium. They have more information about the family inclusive language and again why you would want to use that when you're working with your visitors. And then a big thing, which I kind of mentioned a little bit in the video, is we provide options. So that's one of the best things that you can do for people is to provide them options and allow them to choose what works best for them. So in the top corner, you'll see kind of a t-shirt rack. And so we just found some old t-shirts from the museum that we weren't using. And we call them smocks. And so we have smocks for kids who maybe don't want to get their clothes dirty or have issues about being messy. And so giving them the option that they can wear a smock. We also cut the tags out of the t-shirts or used tagless t-shirts if possible. So you don't have, again, that itchiness, which again might bother some folks. We provide vinyl gloves for people. So make sure you're not buying latex because a lot of folks are allergic to latex. But getting vinyl or oat gloves or again, things where if a kid might be uncomfortable with using their hands or being messy, gloves are really easy to take on and off. We have a sink in our classroom. We're fortunate to have that. We do a lot of our instruction, but the sink is it's a small sink. It's not in the best location for having like 30 kids line up. So again, gloves help us with that. We also have like hand wipes at different stations. So a kid can just wipe off their hands and keep going. I mentioned in the video about the earmuffs. Again, when we walked through our building, we discovered that there's a lot of echoing because we have kind of tall ceilings. And so, yell in your building and see if it echoes. Some kids love the echo, like they will yell, and because my son is one of those, he loves to hear himself echo in a building. And so he will do that. But there are other people who cannot stand it, right? They cannot stand the echo. So again, providing those options for people. We don't believe, I know a lot of, you may have seen, some of the videos where they'll say, okay, if a kid's having a meltdown, like take them away or something like that. Well, we actually don't do that. We encourage kids to still be with even if they have to be separate for a minute. And so we actually oftentimes will have kind of a quieter area. We'll have some related books, maybe that relate to the exhibition that we also sell in our gift shop. So it's a great way to promote people going to your gift shop. But we put some books there. We have a weighted blanket. We have different types of seating. You can't see it here, but we have a big round ball that kids can sit on and bounce on. So again, different options for different people. And in the bottom, you can see one of our staffers as well as one of our volunteers, just kind of showing that when we do activities in our classroom, we again lay out options. To let people know, hey, here's different things that you can do. One of the, I think, best examples, and I'll wrap up after this, but one of the best examples that I can think about providing options is we do an activity based on a book by Maya Angelou called My Painted House, My Chicken and Me. And it's a really great partnership we do with our local zoo here, where we read the story to the kids and then they make some like African beaded necklaces from West Ghana. So in doing the activity, ourselves and thinking about, well, how would kids interact? How would they engage? We discovered that having strings and beads can be really hard for people who maybe don't have the kind of finger dexterity where they can pick up those small beads, or you've got a floppy string. And so we discovered that pasta worked really well, and it's cheap, and you can color it with food dye. And so you can make a lot of it. And that's a lot easier because they're bigger pieces. So those are easier to pick up. And then we also discovered that using pipe cleaners, because with the wire in the center, it's stronger. So it's not moving around a lot. So a pipe cleaner, you put the pasta on there, it kind of stays. So again, it makes it easier for people. So what we do is we provide both options, right? We don't tell people, oh, well, let us know if you need the accessible option and then we'll put the stuff out, right? We just automatically provide both options. And then people can pick which works better for them. So again, that's just a quick example of ways in which trying to think of, again, about lower costs, things that we've done. Lower costs are really, a lot of these are free things that we've done to make the museum more accessible. So with that, I'll put my information up there, and we can put it in the chat. You're always welcome to email me, and I know we'll have time for question and answer at the end. So thank you. And I will turn it over to Fran. Yeah.
Thank you, Christina. Wonderful. My name is Fran Sillau, and I am the accessibility coordinator at the Rose Theater. Thank you, Angie. And we are and you can advance slide, a 501c3 nonprofit theater for young audiences. And we're one of the oldest theaters for young audiences in the United States. A little bit about our company. We're a product of the Junior League movement, founded by a Junior League member, Emmy Gifford, and members of the Junior League of Omaha. And we are one of the oldest Junior League and Theater for Young Audiences theaters in the United States, founded in 1949 and originally called the Omaha Junior Theater. We moved to our first permanent space in 1974 and renamed ourselves the Emmy Gifford Children's Theater after our founder, Emmy Gifford. And the picture on the screen is Miss Gifford in about 1948 with a black skirt and white blouse. She's fixing costumes for a production. Originally, the company was an itinerant company, and then it moved into a movie theater and stayed into that location until November of 1995. You can advance the slide. I would say that inclusivity and accessibility has always been a value from the very beginning of what we do. Emmy Gifford founded this organization on the basis that young people needed a place to explore and imagine and create, and they needed to see high quality theater. So she went to a Junior League and said, let's start this. She had gone to conferences across the United States and decided to bring what she knew back in Omaha. In the late 70s, the theater's administrative staff could already see they were outgrowing their space. It took them until 1993, and they went to benefactor Rose Blumpkin, who was a founder of the Nebraska Furniture Mart furniture store. She had purchased this 1927 movie palace. was called the Riviera, and it was the Astro, and she purchased it because she didn't want to see it demolished, and she kept it for several years and gave it to the Emmy Gifford Children's Theater in 1993. And the picture on the slide is a picture of our building. That is terracotta on the outside of the building. It's 5.5 stories. That dome is green. The big dome is actually an office space where it houses our marketing department. And we are called the Rose Blumkin Performing Arts Center, and we house a company that's us, the Omaha Theater Company, but we're mostly known as the Rose Theater. You can advance slides. The Rose had its first production in the current space in 1995, and we're currently celebrating our 25th anniversary. Accessibility, as I said, has always been a value to us, and it drives every single decision that we make. The picture over here is a photo of our first production, It's a Wonderful Life. In the middle is an actor who played, if anyone is familiar with that movie, Mr. Potter, and the characters of Bedford Falls. And we are actually celebrating our 25th anniversary with the remount of It's a Wonderful Life, this time in COVID times as a radio play. And I'll talk about how we're doing that later. You can advance slide. Our production programming. In a normal year, we have 11 shows. This year, we're doing 5. 2 of those productions are, we have 2 performance venues is what I'm saying. We have a main theater of about 1,000 seats and a black box of 150. And we also have an offsite, a dance and rehearsal and performance studio that houses all of our conservatory dance, Broadway at the Rose classes, which really focuses on students being performers. And it also houses our drama at the Rose, which is really using drama as a tool to empower young people. And both of those happen as part of our education programming, both at the theater and our new state-of-the-art dance studio and performance art studio. And we have usually a 7-member season. We have a membership program where individuals can purchase tickets, family memberships, which have 4 tickets for 7 shows on subscription. And the picture is a picture from our world premiere production of The Dollmaker's Gift. It's about a little girl in 1903 Russia. The little girl is holding a doll with her dolls in front of her, and she imagines about dolls. So we have a fairy doll, an actor dressed in a fairy costume, a boxer doll, and a captain doll, all in 1903 type costuming. You may move on to the next slide. Production programming. Along with the 7 member shows, we have 2 premium big musical events, things like Elf and Matilda. And we have preschool programming, 2 programs a year, interactive productions, sometimes original, sometimes scripted, for young people ages 0 to 5 on Saturday and Sunday mornings. And we do all these programmings for schools. We also have Metro Tour programs that do everything using theater to promote financial literacy and Nebraska history, where we're based, and healthy eating. In addition to all these programs, we also have a separate Community Voices program, which focuses on bringing theater to members of our community that may not have had access to it before. And this production's picture on your right is a picture of an original production of I Dream of an Omaha that focuses on ending gang violence in the city. You can advance slide. Our access services. For our main stage and pre-K programming, for all our production programming, we have 1 production per 1 performance per production that is ASL interpreted. We hire professional interpreters who sign for every individual, and we have a sign section if individuals want to sit in a section to be closer to the interpreter. We also have audio description. We partner with a community organization that does the audio describing for all individuals in our community. And we buy into a pool of trained audio describers who come and view the production. And then they sit in the back of the house with a Darth Vader type mask, and they describe the programming that they see. The other thing we offer is sensory friendly, which Christina talked about what they do in the museum. Sensory friendly is really a way to make sure that everybody can access a production. Sometimes if you're like me, you get startled at the loud noises or changes in the story, or certain jarring sounds take you out of the story. This we have found we can take care of or help by working with the production team as the show goes into its performance, and one of us from our access team can go in and take note of the jarring moments, and then we work with the production team to turn sound down, change a light cue, or we have a traffic cone that I sit down in the house and just make an announcement before the show that if this traffic cone goes up, this means that a loud noise or something jarring is about to happen. Audience members can use their cover their ears, or that we also have sensory sensitivity kits that have headphones and fidgets and different objects to help them soothe them in these experiences so that they can enjoy the production. We do one sensory production per run of, one sensory performance per every production run. And so we advertise that, and we advertise with our community organizations, the Autism Society of Nebraska and Autism Action Partnership. The picture over here is a picture from our production of The Velveteen Rabbit. We have an actor in a trench coat and a Velveteen Rabbit costume with, actually that's me, an actor playing a young 8-year-old in a trench coat. And in this scene, we are pretending that we are secret agents in the garden. You may advance slide. We also have education in-school programming. We curate a production program called the Every Single Child Program. This is a pre-K through 12th grade program in low-income and Title I schools, privately funded by foundations. This means if you're in every single child's school, that you get at least one meaningful visit from the Rose Theater every year. Sometimes you go see a production. Certain grades get classroom residencies with trained teaching artists, and certain grades get pre-K programming and in-school tour programming that goes into school, and it comes with teacher guides and trained teaching artists and facilitators. Separately, we have a pre-K program that goes into low-income preschools, where preschools get to come and see specially designed pre-K programming and then do pre and post workshops with trained teaching artists. And all of this programming, in-school programming, tour programming, is accessible. We use universal design principles to really work with teaching artists to deconstruct the lessons, to make sure that every individual, every student that accesses that programming, whether we know if they have a disability or not, can access it in a way that works for them. So large print and captioned videos. And then we have we're using multiple means of instruction to make sure that students are up, they're moving, or they're sitting and moving. There are different ways to demonstrate whatever modality works well for them to access the programming. And then we have a separate programming called Curriculum Infusion, which really is a program that teachers can select, where we as teaching artists will work with classroom teachers to take what they are teaching in the classroom and use arts integration strategies to craft lessons, to use arts to help students learn a curricular subject like the American Revolution or fairy tales or science projects. I did one on molecules once. And we really used the Curriculum Infusion project to go into those self-contained special education classrooms who maybe come to our other programming in the general education, but maybe they're not ready or their teacher feels they're not ready. So we design programming especially for them. I've gone into self-contained classrooms and done whole units using storybooks with masks and scarves, and really using those visits in 20-minute chunks really brings especially nonverbal students an access point into the arts. So that's a way for us to sort of take something and really make it malleable so that anyone can access it. We can advance the slide. What I just talked about was our in-school programming. We also have programming after school and on Saturday mornings. we hold inclusive acting classes. These are classes that are designed for students with and without disabilities or exceptionalities to work together. And in these classes, we know, or we have an idea of who has a disability and who doesn't, although we don't ask them to self-identify to get into the class. And we try to have as much of an even split as possible. This is a way for both groups of students to learn from each other, and the teaching artists are trained to facilitate programming so that each student can access it. We usually do these acting classes around a subject or a book. Sometimes we might do Descendants, Pinkalicious, some tool that really hooks them in. And then we create ways to use our bodies, voices, and imaginations to create worlds within those stories. Those classes usually sell out. Nowadays, in pandemic world, we're doing most of these classes in a digital format. We started our work in disabilities with self-contained acting classes, just individuals with disabilities working and acting and learning about acting in a classroom setting. We have this programming still in place, but to be honest, our inclusive programming is the programming that is the most popular. If someone is brand new to us or has never taken an acting class, if they want to start with us, we try to do a self-contained option, and all of those self-contained students then can opt in to the inclusive programming. We also work with families to try and just assess what is best for them. And these are all scholarship programs. In addition to those two, we also have ASL interpreted. We have professional interpreters that come in and interpret our productions, but we also have worked with ASL interpreting students. And if you're in a junior or senior, mostly senior, and you're doing your practicum at the university, we work with those students so that they have an opportunity to practice their skills, and then a trained professor comes in and makes sure that everything is checked and balanced. And these classes are interpreted for individuals of the deaf community and anyone who wants to just be around sign language. So sometimes we'll have these classes and no one who needs the service will actually show up. We don't discontinue the interpreter. We keep the interpreter involved in the process because we feel it's important to show and really illustrate that sign language is a language, and we want to embrace it, and we can advance life. We also, we have special classes for individuals with sensory sensitivities that take into mind that everybody accesses the world differently. And we know that there are individuals in our community that can't access because of medical issues. So we take our programming in a non-COVID world to Children's Hospital, and we visit rooms and do storytelling games. Right now, we're working on videos to send to the hospital because as members of the community, we can't be in there physically. Within the hospital, there's something called the Monroe Meyer Institute, which is after school, it's a physical therapy facility and for individuals with disabilities. And we have a week-long residency that's going to begin in October for those individuals, ages kindergarten to 12th grade. And we do some interactive drama residencies / classes. Just another way to bring the theater to where they are instead of always expecting them to come to us. And lastly, we have inclusive youth productions. We have a whole blustering teen theater program. And that's where teens work together to do all the acting in devised programming. And with that, we also have youth theater for individuals beginning at age 8. And we do one specifically inclusive youth production a year where youth do all the acting. It's ASL interpreted, all of those programs, and in the class. And we devise the script so that the students with disabilities and exceptionalities can access it with their peers that are not disabled. And the picture over here are 3 students listening to a teaching artist getting an assignment for an American Revolution residency. And you may advance the slide. We have free memberships, funded by donors to families. And we make sure that we reach out and give these memberships to organizations who can help us distribute them to people who couldn't access our programming in any other way. Also, we have individual scholarships to classes. Every year we have certain scholarship dollars funded by donations and funded by individual foundations who can help us, again, access these programs, get these programs to individuals who need them. And we partner with community organizations to ensure that we have our classes as diverse as we possibly can, reaching all sections of the city. The picture over here are groups in a class in our off-site drama programming, and they are doing Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus and doing work in a circle, and they're wearing their pigeon hats. And you may advance. Some tips to start. When we begin our sort of thinking about how to make things accessible, we create a grand plan. What is it we want to see in our world at the Rose Theater? Who is not at the table? Who is not coming through our doors that we want to invite? We make that grand plan, and we don't expect that it's going to happen tomorrow, but each of us, me starting with accessibility coordinator, I do a assessment, devise the grand plan, and then get the managing director and artistic director in the room, explain my rationale, and then connect with every department in which that touches. And we have monthly accessibility committee check-ins where I invite individuals to the meeting to update them on what it is we're doing. And we work in the backwards design model. What do we want to see? And then moving there one step at a time. When I started, we began accessibility by offering pay what you can and getting a donor to pay for that, and then advertising that service. And then we moved to getting organizations on board helping us distribute tickets. But all of that took one step at a time. And this is one of our team programs, and they are working on shadow play. You may advance the slide. Tips to start. You all dream big. We've all learned that these days. We're dreaming big, and then we're going to work from there. Again, we start with one project. We partner with one organization. When we began our work, even before I officially had this role, working with individuals on the autism spectrum, we got a grant from one organization, Autism Action Partnership, and they helped us decide what the individuals in the autism community needed. And we developed the program specifically for individuals on the autism spectrum. And they helped us. We were the drama people, and they connected us with resources on how to work with individuals or how to invite individuals with autism into our space. And so working together, we took what we both knew and devised a plan. And that became our autism work. And that work is going on 14 years, and it's expanded to include individuals with all disabilities. But it started as one thing and then morphed into many things. And each partner would co-create and contribute to something. And these are individuals with a partner at Boys and Girls Club in a theater reading Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. You may advance the slide. Potential beginning projects, like I said, starting with the pay what you can, finding some donors to fund pay what you can tickets, and then doing PR to get that work out. And then sort of segueing into the bigger idea, which for us was the autism work, and then it followed by the work with audio description and getting those people with potential buy-in on board. That's really important. We don't want to do this work in a silo because we all can't know and understand everything. And these are individuals learning about the American Revolution, and they are throwing tea overboard during the Boston Tea Party, one of our school residencies. You can advance the slide. Sensory-friendly programming. I discussed kind of what that was earlier, but I think some people are daunted by what this means. Really, if you have someone who can be your advocate going into a space, maybe it's a staff member, and identifying the parts of the program that could be jarring to individuals, and then finding ways to sort of lessen the sound in theater or lessen the impact, how someone might feel about that, then you're halfway there. Then if you have some funding, and this cost us no more than $1,000, less than that, I think about 700, where we can create some bags with fidgets, even plastic bags. Then we have those for individuals to sort of use and play with as they need them. That's a good way to start. That's a good way to open doors and welcome people. And this is one of our actors, Kevin Earhart, doing a Dr. Seuss residency, dressed as Cat in the Hat. You may advance the slide. The evolutions, the Autism Action Partnership stuff started with one class, one organization, and it segued into a program that serves hundreds of students a year through our classes and our partnerships. So it took one partnership, and they decided actually to not fund that particular program anymore, but because of the work that they planted, the seeds they planted, we were able to continue. Audio description, which is the work of a describer, speaking into a mask what they're seeing on the stage. We don't currently fund that in-house, but we work with a community organization and a consortium of organizations, and we share costs to that. We pay a small fee per show. And so it's something that we can pay a little something for that has a large impact. So if you can create some sort of consortium with other arts organizations and find similar uses, that is a good way to begin. And this other thing is failing big. I'll tell you, we're still working on captioning our programming. We've started last year captioning on Twitter, and we captioned using iPads, and both those things using PowerPoint failed big. We put those on sort of a hiatus because we're still figuring out how to do it better. But that's an example of, we don't get it perfect all the time. We failed big, and we were honest about that. And this is a picture of our production of Go Dog Go, 2 dogs in a yellow car, one with a big hat, riding off into the sunset. And that is my presentation.
Thank you. I do have some questions for you. So how do you start budgeting for accessibility? How do you budget for accessibility in your organizations?
Sure. I'll go first. We work backwards. So we decide what it is we need, who is not at the table. And then I go out and find an organization to have an honest conversation with. And once we have an honest conversation, I ask them for budget points. And I go back and price everything out with the partner. And then I work with our development director and our managing director, and we come up with finding funding sources. And then we decide, okay, can we do this much this year, this much the following year? And we're transparent about it. And keeping in mind that we all know there are laws, that means we need to provide that access service, not yesterday, but today when somebody requested. So if there's something that requests something that we don't have, then we dig deep into our coffers, and it's an unbudgeted expense, but we try to budget everything. But if there's some service they need, I go out and find partners who can provide that to us at a reasonable cost, or I find it for free. But in terms of the big things, we work 2 to 3 years out trying to find things.
So I think for us, maybe a good kind of capsule event of that is our big Juneteenth event. So typically we do a big outdoor street festival that has lots of moving components and parts. And so when we started doing, for example, ASL interpretation on the main stage, what we figured out was, okay, well, here's how much it's going to cost, and where can we find a donor or sponsor who's willing to pay for something else. So for us, that looked like bringing in a partner who could do like t-shirt screen printing, so we didn't have to pay for a different activity. So we were able to reroute money that way. So typically that's oftentimes how we kind of approach it, is we, like Fran said, right, think holistically about the event, include it at the beginning of doing the event, because it's a lot cheaper if you think of it at the front end, and then it's incorporated, right? And it's part of the ethos of what you're doing, and it doesn't feel like it's some sort of add-on. Well, okay, well, you asked about it, so here you go.
Right.
So.
How do you market your accessible programs? How do you get people to come into the door to actually participate in the accessibility that you're providing?
I'm always challenged by this question, and I learn new things every day. In general, we try to partner with an organization like the Autism Action Partnership to get word out to what it is we're doing. We want to offer free tickets. We funnel through them, and we co-market these things. But I'm a big advocate of saying that just because nobody's coming in the door right away doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. And we don't need 50 people to come in. I'm lucky to work with an organization that doesn't count by numbers and goes, oh, there's not 50 people, so we can't do sensory friendly. These are ways for new audiences to come through your door who didn't know that your organization was for them, because in so many ways, there's so many barriers. So that we do a lot of marketing, and then we still do it anyway if they don't come right away. But we partner, a lot of partner.
So I'll ditto about the partnerships and working with people. I think that's a huge component of getting people to the table. I'll also say that we think of programming in a both and. So we do programming that is both for people with that disability. So in particular, I'll use the autism. So we have programming that is specifically for we call them like on the spectrum programs. So people on the spectrum, right? Photography on the spectrum, art on the spectrum, that kind of thing. Because it's important for those folks to communicate and to be with one another. But we also incorporate, spectrum friendly things in all of our programs and all of the things we do. So that we're, I think Fran talked about it really well in his presentation about doing those inclusive programs and how those inclusive camps were really popular. People love stuff like that, where they can participate and be, again, a regular family, like doing the same things, but that they have options that are for them. So, so being able to market, I think, in kind of both of those veins. We also early on, when we kind of first started out, we got a sponsor to sponsor little squeezy balls or little free things. And so we would tell people, like we would work with therapy centers and say, hey, come visit the museum on a night when, we're not busy, come see, the museum is for you. So we would often have, and particularly we would have a lot of parents that would come out and they would kind of come and like scope us and to see, like, is the museum really okay? Like, can my kid yell in here? Is that all right? And so just having something that they could just take with them and know, okay, this is a friendly place. And like Fran said, it takes time to build that audience. It's not necessarily an overnight thing. But if you consistently and continually do it, right, people will come.
Do you have accessibility committees at your organizations that you work with?
Yes, we do. I chair the accessibility committee, and we also have a separate inclusion committee, which I co-chair. So the accessibility committee was sort of born out of the education department's wanting to bring individuals with different exceptionalities into our programming. And the inclusion committee was an offshoot of that, making sure that folks who didn't have specific exceptionalities access the programming, which that's how our community voices program started, making sure that we were going to communities that didn't necessarily know the Rose Theater was an option for them. And both those committees work together. The inclusion committee also works on our company culture, because we want to continue to make sure that we're an opening and welcoming, not only to the community, but a safe and healthy place to work.
So I will say yes, but so we work, we've been doing this for about 4 years now. So we work with actually our regional arts council, the Arkansas Arts Council, and particularly Janet Perkins, who is the disability coordinator for the state. So she and I do a lot of work together around accessibility, around teaching other organizations to be accessible. There's also our education director. And so kind of the three of us sort of think about those things. But we also have some outside partners that we work with, especially about, for us, helping us to get to the next level, because we're always wanting to incorporate more and be better. But we don't have like a traditional standing committee. We don't have we're pretty small staff. We don't have a separate position that's responsible for accessibility. I've kind of made it everyone's responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility to incorporate family inclusive language, right? It's everybody's responsibility to be welcoming to people and to think about accessibility. So.
So how has accessibility changed at your organization since COVID-19?
Oh, it's still a value. We just need to, we've figured out, and it changes daily, how to incorporate it and make it live safely in the world that we live in. For instance, we're doing the sensory friendly programming. We are asking individuals to bring their own sensory sensitivity fidgets, toys. We will provide headphones, but the rest of it for now. And we also have created social narratives that Christina talked about. We're making them digital, so they live on our website. So those are some examples.
Yeah, so we just sanitize things a lot. So we have a sensory backpack as well. And we also have a washer and dryer at our site, so that really helps. And so we still provide those things, and we just sanitize them after people bring them back. We did have to, right now, we've turned off our touchscreens, but we're trying to work on a process where we can turn those things back on. And that will be safe, where people will feel safe. Because it's not just about being safe, but it's also about the feeling of safety people have. So that's kind of what we've done. We're trying to, we're sort of like everybody else, wading into this weird kind of video programming world. And so we're actively working at, how do we provide like captioning or ASL interpretation for our, especially for our live videos, because our kind of initial foray has been into live work. It's easy to do for recorded things. It's a lot harder when you're talking about a live performance or a live event. So, so sort of trying to figure some of that out as we go.
So what is your greatest piece of advice for those working towards accessible programs?
It's never going to be perfect, so I don't wait for it to be, because it won't. You will always learn things. Your biggest thing is humility, saying when somebody says, "Why don't you?" or "I wish," so thank you, we will include that, and then genuinely do, and just be in a space of learning.
Yeah, so I would echo that, right? Start today and listen. So I'll give you an example. We, early on in the accessibility stuff, we had had a program where we had at our museum, and one of the panelists has an adult child. She's an adult caregiver of an adult child, and she had to change him on the floor of our bathroom. And I found out about that, and I was mortified, because I thought, like, if I wouldn't want that, right? Nobody would want that. And so we, in talking with her, we're like, would it be, she suggested like an adult changing table, which I didn't even know those were things, right? And so when we had the opportunity, we're actually doing a remodel of our first floor of our exhibit space. And so now while we're doing the remodel, right, part of doing that is incorporating universal design and putting in an adult changing table, right? Because that's something that, it took us 2 years to get there, right? But it was something that, as Fran said, when people tell you to do things, do them. So that's something that we're doing. But I think, again, listening, being willing to learn, and being willing to change what you know, and to change maybe what you perceive. And being, I think, flexible to do that, not being so rigid and saying like, oh, we can't do this, right? But again, looking for the opportunity to say, how can we welcome you here? How can we make you be a part of the space?
Can open up the for other questions from attendees. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat or the Q&A window. We can answer any questions that you may have. Just give it a minute. Let me double check. I don't see any additional questions that are coming through. So Christina and Fran, thank you so much for joining us and giving your presentations today. It was great information, and I wish everyone the best and have a rest of a great day. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you all.